Moving forward, human resource, that is, the health workers are vital to an effective healthcare system, and the health worker is the gatekeeper of the health system. Retaining key employees is critical to the long-term health and success for your business. Well, it's a vast topic to be covered with so many hows and whys. So for that, may I now call on stage Mr. Shourav Das, who has a degree of biomedical engineer from Bombay University and has more than 20 years of experience in healthcare. He is the senior manager heading the practice development team in Alcon, India. May I have Mr. Shourav Das on stage, please?
At the outset, I would really like to thank Jodhpur Ophthalmic Society and Dr. Ali and Dr. Senthil for giving me and us the opportunity to present before you. And being a part of this entire journey of shaping up doctors into what we call as doctorpreneurs. And what I'm going to do right now, and as you just mentioned, I head up the practice development team in Alcon, India. We are 5 of us, 7-year-old team, and collectively 70 years of experience in eye care. And the only thing that we do in this organization is practice development. That is helping staff, helping practices like you all, integrate any advanced technology into practice through practice support, staff training, and patient education. And staff training happens to be one of our key interest points, and that's something that we specialize in. That's something that I'm going to share with you this afternoon. It's going to be a pretty simple recipe, with no ingredients masked, and you'll be able to find it pretty easy to implement in your practice. To starting with, why is it critically important to retain and motivate your staff? Well, there are a couple of quick reasons for it. Your staff is actually the reflection of what you are, in your practice, your approach, and so on and so forth. A motivated staff, and we all discussed this since morning, can actually make you, and an unmotivated staff can actually do the other ways. There have been research and studies done which says that retaining a staff is 25% much more cheaper than re-recruiting them. And of course, if you have an undermotivated staff, you have the potential challenge of losing him or her to a competition. And of course, a great staff, if you've developed this, like what Dr. Singhvi talks about, great leadership staffs, helps you expand your business like no other. Is that my opinion? Not really. Even the consumers have been saying the same thing, which are our patients. Here are the top 5 things that potentially can turn off a patient in a practice based on a survey that was done. And that happened to be, the first one happened to be impolite staff. And likewise, yet another study done by 29,000 professionals, healthcare professionals, said that if you had a happy staff, it would directly mean you would have happy patients. So you can see the connection. So you have happy staff, happy patient, happy practice. Here are the 3 common mistakes that a practitioner does when recruiting a staff, and these are the ones. The first one is neglecting the investment of a practice staff personnel. Primarily, you tend to, this is your investment pattern, which is correct, by the way. You invest largest in terms of infrastructure, then your equipments. But when it comes to investing in staff, your practice staff, you invest very minuscule. The ladder is correct, but you need to invest a little bit more. The second happened to be, most of the practices tend to multitask a staff. In the whole game of optimizing the productivity, of personnel, you're trying to multitask people, and that's the biggest mistake that you do. And then you try to hamper some of the areas which you shouldn't have multitasked, because these were the ones which were about to generate revenue for you. And the last mistake that happens is there's no backup. You feel that he's Rasik. Rasik has been working with me for 15 years. Wo chhod ke kahan jayega? And then one fine day he leaves, and you don't have a backup, and that's one of the biggest mistake. So what I'm going to do is a fairly simple, as I said, a recipe which is basically, these are the 4 ingredients of how you can probably retain and motivate your staff. What normally happens is people say that I've been paying this person so well, what worse can happen? I mean, wo to tikega hi, kahan jayega wo? But what is actually important is all the 4 things put together, which is hiring them correctly, design a best job fit for them, paying well, and then keeping them motivated. If all these 4 things are in line, is when your staff would decide to stay back and continue to perform much, much higher than anything before. So let's discuss in detail each one of them. So when I say hire them correctly, what I really mean is whenever you're hiring this personnel, and some of the entrepreneur doctors or the doctorpreneurs are very, very vigilant and sharp. I remember Dr. Singhvi, the way he used to recruit his staff, earlier days, and what are the traits that he used to look for. So what I've done is prepared a small chart, of some of the traits that you can look forward for when you're recruiting a staff. And this is in the order of chronology, which means this is what you look forward. And you'll notice that a certain task which is actually not required that you would look forward. For example, front desk. The primary thing that you look forward is a person having pleasant personality, having good local communication skill, and confidence. Notice that I didn't mention experience in this entire segment. When it's optometrist, it's the experience that, of course, matter, but someone who is settled and is also easygoing. When it's counselor, very important, interpersonal skills and local language proficiency. Even if the counselor would be a blank slate, doesn't really matter, and if it actually helps, because you're able to scribble everything that you wanted to write them, and what you want them to talk about. He or she doesn't, in this case, it has to be a she, doesn't really come back with any preconceived notion about how a communication has to be built, how a patient or caregiver has to be dealt with. And then paramedical staff, of course, you need experience. Floor managers are these days getting very, very, very important role, and a lot of important practices have started investing in having a floor manager. Again, a good interpersonal skill and a middle-aged person is something which you really recommend. Since counselor is an important part, and most of the times when we visit practices and they say that it's of course very critical, where do we find good counselors? Here is just a slide just to help you where you can probably find good counselor. I know it's difficult to get, but this is option number one, and it's worth the investment. Hunt for candidates who are from the tourism industry or the aviation, real estate, especially aviation. They're really trained very well, and not all of them make it to the skies. There are some who are they're back, and you can hire them, you can poach them, pay them well. The only thing is that they don't remain long enough. So you prepare a backup, but that's the first step that you would do. Second, if you don't find any of them over here, what you can probably do is upskill your existing staff. Maybe a front desk into a counselor and so on and so forth. But at any point in time, have a counselor, and that's something. Then do not wait for the perfect one, but you just keep upskilling your patients. The next happens to be the hospital manager or the marketeer, and in this particular role specifically, very important is the better halves of practitioners does the best job. But if it doesn't, if it's not working out, please hire somebody professional who understands this. And his or her job is to look after the well-being of your staff, conduct regular feedback programs, supporting you in NABH accreditations, and making sure the market visibility happens, especially in your neighborhood. Let's get into the next one, is the designing the best job fit, which is what I mean by the ecosystem. And that's a very interesting. You might pay them well, you've got the right people, but if you're not giving them a conducive atmosphere or the right kind of job, they'll never be satisfied. So here are a couple of mistakes that practitioners tend to overlook at. When it comes to hiring a front desk, you don't need to have somebody who is very experienced, a 25-year-old experienced person. That's really not needed. An optometrist, assisting in operation theater. Wow, that's a big grievance. They would never tell you, but that's something they would really not love to do. A senior but unqualified admin, that also doesn't really work. Somebody who's been working for since so long, he says, "Aaj se tum pura hospital ka kaam sambhaloge," because they don't have that expertise of managing staff, and they will never be able to be successful. And likewise, counselors also doing cashless, also doing medical reimbursement, also doing all the documentation, it's really not worth it. So how do you nurture your ecosystem? That's one part of it, but when it comes to nurturing your ecosystem, here are a couple of things that specifically in ophthalmology works very well in developing your ecosystem, which is, number one, dedicated, designated seat or room for your employees, and especially for counselors. Counselors, they would even if they're paid well, they said, I have not the correct kind of room. There isn't ventilation. People keep coming and going, and that's not the correct ecosystem. Pay them timely on designation. Even if you're paying them well, but you're not paying them timely, doesn't really work out. Keep separate, well-maintained washrooms for each one of your staff. Staff in total. Encourage seasonal celebrations for your family, and family is something. If they get glued to your practice, it's the family who will not let them leave the job. Do not make them work late, and occasionally you could, but do not make them as a routine that, this is beyond your time. And most important thing is treat your staff with dignity and respect. They'll be really sold out for your life. Next is how well to pay. And this is an interesting concept that, you would want to do, and this is based out of some research. So notice what I've named it as, why is it important to correctly pay? It may not be highly paid, but correctly pay. If you underpay our staff, and if you feel that you've got smart by, if you feel that you've got smart by, getting the most out of it, mark my words, they're absolutely non-performing, and they will eventually non-perform. They actually turn out to be the non-performing SS, or the NPAs, as we call them. And most important, they are always vulnerable to the competition. And that's what one fine day, if there's an opportunity, they'll really flee. An overpaid staff is, of course, is an envy for your other staff. But a correctly paid staff, and you can do this analysis, is absolutely right to do his job and also take stretched assignments. Now, the slide I'm going to share is a very interesting slide of what does the correct pay look like for the key staff members based on different tier cities. And this is how it happens to come up. These are some indicative salaries that you can pay, packages that you can look forward for. Let's say I'm talking about Jodhpur. If it's a tier 2 town we're talking about, a counselor should be paid in the range of 20 to 30,000 rupees. An optometrist is 30 to 35, a front desk 20 to 25, and a hospital manager around 40,000 rupees. And whenever you see the asterisk, that's the incentives added to it. And of course, the range is based on the experience, relevant experience that the person or the candidate brings to your hospital. What are the other tagged benefits? Again, along with this, what are the exact benefits? This is based on our internal research that we do that really helps, which supports the pay packages. Encourage to give them a cafeteria benefits. Somebody who are giving the meals twice, they're really so happy about it. Provide your staff with health benefits. There's a research that states that your employees tend to stay twice as much if you give them health benefits, insurance and other things than as compared to others. Offer paid leaves. Again, our research says that when you do this, your absentees are actually lesser than you thought it would be. And then the third one, that we Indians are really happy and they get full for it if you give them loans, children loans, personal loans, and so on and so forth. Let's talk about the last thing, which is staff motivation. And whenever I talk about staff motivation, the biggest thing that they say, you said, Shourav, you know what? Motivation never lasts. To them, I say, so does bathing, but yet we recommend it daily. So motivation is an ongoing process. You can't really be doing once and, it's done for the day. And there are several ways through which you can motivate yourself, and you should be. And whatever works well in a school of thoughts, any one of them is something that you should imply. Let's start with the first one, which is recognitions. This is the easiest to win. This is something that you all can do it Monday morning. Conduct monthly meetings, and share success. Encourage people to share success stories. It could be tinier things of a person who just solved a housekeeping problem, or let's say somebody a patient who gave a great feedback. All these things, and then you make a employee of the month, give them vouchers, give them staff badges, and so on and so forth. Nothing sells well than this recognitions that you can do on a monthly basis. And it also inspires others to have the similar best practices. Staff training. I think this is something which is very critical and important. Whenever a staff realizes that, here's my boss who is interested in my growth, whether it's an internal training or an external training, any kind of training or an online training, whenever you invest in your staff and your training program, they perceive it, in a very correct fashion. But of course, you cannot eat the cake and have it too. So do not have this training done after the working hours or say, kaam ke saath saath karo. Give them off for a day if there is a specific training that happens. And I remember doing a lot of staff. Alcon has been pioneers in terms of staff training, and we have been investing heavily and will continue to invest in the days to come in various forms and fashions of staff training. And I was discussing during lunch with Dr. Singhvi, one of the initial days of a training that, I used to travel to this place, and we used to do a lot of counselor trainings, and we continue to do that and now and in the days to come. So you can be pleasantly reach out to any of your Alcon personnel, and based on a bandwidth, we'll be happy to support with any of these programs. The next one happens to be promotions, empowerment. That's what it's all about. When you empower somebody, when you include your GOA, the grant of authority to solve problems, they're really very thrilled about it. Any designation, it could be the designations of seniority, can really motivate a person big time, and you can create each one of them. Give them assignments, even if it was, let's say, if you were undergoing a process of NABH, let's say you're the project manager for the NABH accreditation for the operation theater. Let's say you're the project manager for taking care of the floor, and so on and so forth. You can give different designations, and you will never fall short of designations and giving them that empowerment, so that they really are thrilled and they want to stay back. And the last one that I'm going to talk about is incentives. Like it or not, this is something which is here to stay, and this is what motivates, apart from everything. And that's why I put everything this at the last. There are several models in eye care in terms of incentivization that exist, whatever suits you. And I'll share the three of them at this point in time, just a slide each. The first model is called as the model of parity, and a lot of practitioners have adopted this. What really works in this is that each one of your staff, and I have two more slides, each one of your hospital staff are incentivized. It could be the front desk who is given 50 rupees, and they're incentivized per surgery. So everybody, even if, even if it was a housekeeping person mopping the floor, is also incentivized by 20 rupees and so on and so forth. So imagine a situation, what happens. If there's a situation where earlier, without incentives, there were 10 surgeries, the entire staff would say, oh God, 10 surgery hai. Now, when you have 10 surgeries, you say, wow, it's 10 surgeries today. Even the front desk is smiling last. Even the person who is swapping the floor is doing it with more energy. And you'll suddenly realize everything is working so well. And at the same time, you would see that you are actually spending, let's say, close to 700, 800 rupees. This is a rough calculation per surgery, which is very well enough to solve the problem, because these are the investments. The next one happens to be the model of, which is specific to counselors. By the way, earlier one was a weekly payout model. This one happens to be a fortnightly payout, where you pay to the specific groups only, the counselors, optometrists, and so on and so forth. You decide a monthly average. This is what normally was cracking, and anything above it, you give a certain amount of incentives. And the last model is all about patient feedback, where you, as many feedbacks that you collect, positive feedbacks that you collect, and this is more like in the journey of making a patient-centric practice, the more amount of feedbacks that you collect, and each one of them gets based on the number of points they correct. Any one of the models is really worth, and if you were to do your maths, you would really realize that you're not losing out a lot of money out of the entire story. In fact, you'll be gaining a lot. So just to summarize, please invest on your practice staff, more than your money, more than your energy, in terms of more towards the time. As the popular cosmetic company's tagline says, I'm worth it. And seriously, your staff, your time is really worth the staff, towards the staff, and it really pay off in the long run. With that, thanks for your time, and have a great evening ahead. Thank you very much.